Okay, good day, everyone. I can see some people already joined in, so it's my pleasure to welcome you once again to this edition of the Blaze Connected Construction Series, which is a bi-weekly series we have every 2 weeks. So today I have in the house engineer Dr. Mansur Hamma-Adama, who is a chartered engineer with the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria. He's also an Innovation Catalyst Level 2, which is Future Thinker, issued by Scottish Institute of Enterprise. He had his PhD in Construction Project Management from Robert Gordon University, Aberdeen, United Kingdom. And currently, he's the Assistant Chief Civil Engineer at the Federal Road Maintenance Agency, FEMA, in Nigeria. Before then, he was a lecturer at the Kaduna Polytechnic for up to 7 years, and he had written several journal articles and research publications. In fact, this session today was informed by one of his numerous publications. So today we'll be talking about drivers and barriers toward BIM adoption in sub-Saharan Africa, and I'll be asking a couple of questions based on the numerous research we've done on this topic. So Dr. Hamma, how are you doing today? It's glad to welcome you to this session.
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's my honor being here with you guys.
Okay, so just like typical sessions, I'll be asking you quite a number of questions around this topic. Typically, today we hear of digital information modeling, BIM, and a lot of people hear of BIM today, but so many people are not even so sure of what exactly BIM is all about. I mean, from numerous polls that I've conducted in so many conferences and events across Africa, it became obvious that a lot of professionals in the BIM sector in Africa still does not understand what BIM is. So how do you explain BIM to an average professional who is still very new to the whole concept of BIM and the technology and the process of BIM?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I find it quite interesting to explain what actually BIM is all about, because during my early stage of my research, I realized that most of my interviewees and some of my respondents were quite a bit confused about what's actually BIM and what's actually BIM is all about. From the beginning, I think the shortest word to use for BIM is just a concept, or you can call it a process. But this concept is being actually supported by 3 components. The first two components are the technology and the policy, and then all those things are involved within the process. So we have 3 components. We have a technology, we have process, and we have the policy. The technology, it's the kind of aspect of the BIM that actually people feel like this is just BIM. When somebody is using a Revit or somebody is using a robot or anything like that, this kind of tools, they say, I'm using BIM. But this is not quite BIM itself, because it's just a BIM tool. It's not the BIM itself, because using it alone, it's not actually telling you that you're using BIM, but rather you're just using BIM tool. How it actually works, the simple or straightforward definition of BIM can be actually look as a process of creating, sharing information at the right time through life cycle of building or infrastructure. So it involves a lot of things. It involves the process itself. It involves the policy that actually guides the usage, and then the technology that actually supports, which is actually called tool, BIM tool. So the components of BIM are the 3: the technology, the policy, and the process. The process is the entire round of connectivity between the stakeholders, and the technology includes the softwares, which are normally called the tools, including the infrastructure use, internet connection, and things like that. Or there's some of the tools that are actually web-based. Some of the tools, BIM tools, are web-based, so you don't need to buy them as soft to install on your system. You can just have them on the cloud, and you can get a space for it, and you can have a common data environment, and you can have that both from some of the providers of that. So this is all about BIM. So I don't know if you have if you need more information about BIM, fine. I can explain more maybe at the end of it if you have any question regarding that.
Okay. So just like you mentioned, if you have any clarification on that, you can also drop your comments or questions in the comment section. But basically, from what you said, it appears that most people today are focused more on the technology aspect of BIM, and to them, they feel like that is BIM in its entirety. Yeah. Okay. So
that's correct.
Okay, so that actually leads me to the second question, because from that, the implication is that there are currently some people adopting BIM today in the African BIM sector, and some people are not adopting it. So the adopters and non-adopters of BIM in the BIM sector. So can you just give me an overview of the current level of BIM maturity in sub-Saharan Africa? Perhaps we use Nigeria as a case study for that. So to shed some light on the level of maturity of BIM currently in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. This is one part, also segment of my research in my PhD work, that I did a macro BIM adoption study in Nigeria, which is one segment of my PhD study. The first thing I need to first clarify is we have different ways of measuring maturity of BIM at macro level. You know, we have different levels. We have what we call micro, there's what we call meso, and there's what we call macro. And then significantly for the subject of discussion, we're going to talk about the macro. The macro, it is the adoption of BIM considering a country industry. So basically we have two segments, or we have two measurements that we normally take how to measure BIM maturity in a particular country. We have all of them are actually, the data are normally coming from in a numbers. We call it quantitative. So it's a quantitative way of measuring the maturity level of BIM. And one of the ways we use what is called BIM capability stages, which is normally going through the macro adoption, the 5 a series of developed models. The first one is diffusion area model. We have macro maturity components. We have macro diffusion dynamics. We have policy action model, and then micro diffusion responsibility. But in that perspective, we have a BIM maturity at different stages. We have what is called stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. The stage 3, the stage 1 is the first, is just a little step ahead of a adoption trend, which is actually the modeling stage. So let me just use Nigeria as a case study. Nigeria is actually at that stage, which is called stage 1, and it's at modeling stage. So most of the firms or engineering firms or architectural firms and things like that, they normally adopt BIM actually at micro level. What I mean at micro level, what I mean, it is at their own company stage. So there's what we call lonely BIM. The lonely BIM or small BIM is actually a BIM that you adopt within your organization. So you can have a model that you work within your organization, and you take responsibility of everything of aspect of it, but you don't normally share information through that model with other companies. So you only do it within your company. So that stage is called modeling stage. So we have the first stage is modeling, the second stage is collaboration, and the third stage is integration. So we have stage 1, 2, 3. That's at BIM capability stages. Then the second aspect, it is the BIM model. That's actually the model developed by Bill Richard. That's the UK model, normally known as maturity level. We have maturity level 0, we have level 1, we have level 2, and level 3. The level 3 is not well defined at the moment, but level 0, level 1, and level 2 are well defined. But if you look at it collaboratively, you can see that the stage is 1, 2, 3 from the one developed by Soka and Kazim, actually going in line with the level 1, 2, 3 of the UK-based model. And the step 0 for the UK model, it's normally the use of AutoCAD 2D, kind of using a paper-based way of exchanging information, not quite using a digital way. It's called level 0. So you haven't started taking the step. So for both the two, when you take them together, you can see the 1, 2, 3 lap together. Only 0, that's level 0 from the UK base. That's quite different. But that actually deals with or takes care of what we have at the moment in most of our countries. So the maturity level in Nigeria, the awareness level is a bit higher, but the adoption is quite insignificant, because even the adoption level at the moment, it's at company level. You hardly seen, I think, based on my research or based on some of the interviews I conducted, I only established 2 companies that actually have ever collaborated or taken BIM at construction stage. So it's quite amazing to see that some companies are quite keen to having such kind of collaborative working in process. So, but let me explain the stages. The first stage is the modeling stage, which involves modeling, developing your design. It could be a road design, it could be building, it could be factory or anything like that. Anything like maybe like a first infrastructure, or it could be from the built environment. Developing in a 3D form, which is a very intelligent. What I mean intelligent, I mean the each aspect of the component you build in that kind of model, it has the specification or details of that info, or that maybe assuming you just put on a door or window. That window, when you touch that window, you see the size of the window, you see the name of the manufacturer, you see the lifespan, when you expect to have some kind of maintenance, the material made from the segment of it. Virtually every aspect of that component will be embedded in it. So that is called intelligent model. So developing such kind of model without transmitting or without collaborating with other stakeholders is called modeling, BIM modeling stage. And the next stage is the collaboration stage. So in such a way that you can, after building this intelligent model, you can collaborate with other stakeholders to develop other aspects of it. I can refer back us to something related to what's it called, car manufacturers or mechanical engineering. There's what they normally call design hall. So it's like a kind of database where all the designers will have put on their information in it. So in this kind of thing, it's called this collaboration aspect of it, having the model and then sending. It could be sending the model by using email or by using flash drive or anything like that. That one is called collaboration. But the highest peak or the peak level of that is called integration, where you can have this model online. That's a cloud-based computing. So you can have that kind of model online, and everyone is having intake, having input in it. So without anyone affecting the other person's aspect of work. So you can see that kind of model. You can develop your own design series. It could be electrical design, and the electrical designer, when he's doing his designs, he can decide to put on something that actually is not supposed to be in a particular location. That model will show him, okay, in this place there's a window, so you can't put a socket there, or you cannot do piping there, or things like that. So it's quite amazing. It's really interactive in that perspective. For the as a whole as Africa at once, I think the South Africa, it's moving faster than all other countries, because they're sort of having some institution trying to come up with this kind of strategy. But the issue we're having here in Nigeria, we don't have actually the champions. So we need to have the champions, and we need to set face for that. Is that clear to that?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much for the in-depth clarification. So obviously, we are still at the very early stages of BIM adoption across Sub-Saharan Africa, and like you mentioned, there are a whole lot of causes to that. So can you shed more light on are you more specific on the various barriers that that is keeping BIM adoption from taking full effect in comparison to other parts of the world where they've been able to adopt BIM at a higher level of integration?
Yes, we have some common barriers. Virtually, the barriers are common to most of the countries, but we have some specific barriers to our domain. But the thing is, we need to know the barriers are actually being divided into different parts. We have there's some of the barriers that you can define them as internal barriers. There's some of the barriers that can be called external. So for the internal barriers, we can have something like training issue. We don't have enough personnel, people that can actually handle this kind of new tools, and investment in that, the cost of investment for the BIM itself, because you need to train personnel, you need to invest in the technology, in the infrastructure and things like that. Another, for the external factor, it could be legal, it could be protocol, and sometimes it could be even demand from the client or the other, or kind of issues from the other stakeholders. And there's another aspect that we can actually segment these barriers, where we can say personal we can call it legal, we can call it management, we can call it cost, and then we can call the other one as technology. For the personal, we have resistance from the individual, and we can also have issue related to training. So we don't have enough personnel to handle this kind of tools and the process itself. And for the legal, we have ownership issues. Sometimes we have intellectual property rights, and we have government policy. Sometimes it could be the protocol adopted, a standardization issue, because the kind of components we use for build industry in Nigeria could be different from the UK, could be different from the US, because the components of building in Nigeria, we don't use some of the aspects of the building components that they use there because they are in temperate zones. Another issue is they use like a glaze kind of windows. We don't use glaze type of windows here. We don't use double glaze type of windows. We use single glaze type of windows. So these are the kind of standardization issues which are actually related to legal issues, because if you bring that kind of thing, it's going to affect people. Probably people will be suffocated in their buildings and things like that. When you could talk about management, it could be resistance from the management of the company, and there's some issue related to cultural change of the construction industry itself. And then we have cost issue, so the financing of the BIM, because when you're going to do a BIM based project, you need to have financial backup. It could be from the clients, that could come from the collaborative. You can have a contribution from both stakeholders, each stakeholder contributing some part, or that such kind of things can be embedded into the contract. And the technical aspect of it is the infrastructure and the tools. So we have issue of infrastructure, especially in Africa, in the African continent. You can have issue related to data bandwidth, and issue related to the infrastructure. I saw even issue related to electricity. It's quite an amazing thing for somebody to have light over a particular range of hours. Maybe you want to work online and things like that. So these are the kind of aspects of barriers. But when you take it in terms of the hierarchy, or you rank them, the first issue we have in Nigeria, it is the lack of expertise. Because when I interview some of the companies, they complain of some of the graduates that are coming from the universities. They don't have much skill in that perspective. And the second aspect is the first aspect is lack of expertise within the organization itself, and the second one is within the team of the project. The third one is the standardization and protocol. The fourth one is going to be the client demand, lack of government policy, additional project finance to support the BIM-based projects, and then the collaboration among the stakeholders, because we have issue with lack of collaboration because each of the stakeholder maybe is going to be like, oh, this is my information, I don't want to share the whole of it to the entire team. So there is that kind of monopoly of information. So that's really critical to achieving this kind of collaborative working. So these are some of the major barriers we face in adopting BIM in Nigeria as a country.
Okay, yeah, that's quite a whole lot, because some of the things you mentioned are obviously very critical. Issues of electricity, for example. A lot of people, especially when you're not working within a company structure, maybe you have a smaller firm, you find issue of power supply, internet, and even personnel, people that are well trained on this issue. So these are quite a lot of issues. But beyond the barriers, what do you see as some of the drivers that can also help to increase BIM adoption across Africa? Like some drivers you also feel that will help to fast track implementation of BIM across Sub-Saharan Africa? Yeah,
in terms of drivers, when you talk about barriers, normally are like you just like reversing it. But in some concept, you can have some of them being adjusted, because when you try to ask people, what do you think is what can drive you to adopt BIM in his organization, you see different answers actually. But when you're trying to put them together, you realize that some of the drivers are availability of the trained personnel to handle this kind of tools, which is actually exactly as proof of cost of savings. We don't normally have this kind of attitude of keeping record of such kind of setting phase of this kind of thing, because when you have a project of this kind, you use BIM and you set it out to have like a cost saving, if you can have like a journal, publishing a journal, it might not be journal, international journal, it could be just a local journal, to establish what did you use and what the kind of money or the kind of resources you actually save in using this kind of tool or this kind of process. You realize that some people will develop interest in doing that as well. So the third part is the software affordability. Everyone will testify that most of our companies are using cracked version of softwares. So they find it difficult to actually go online with them, because when you use a cracked software, you'll be afraid to go online because sometimes you can get blocked and things like that. So, and if you use a cracked version, sometimes you cannot exploit to the fullest. So that's one issue. So this actually needs support for this kind of softwares, because the professionals are not being paid well enough to acquire such kind of software. Only some few firms are having such kind of projects that can finance this kind of strategy. But the thing is, we need to just step out on that, and government need to get involved in that as well. And what actually motivates like UK in taking this step is by having a particular benchmark of amount of contract. When you have this kind of contract, you have to be BIM enabled for you to even get that kind of project. And there is so many supports and policies that actually guide you to do that. The fourth aspect is the awareness of the technology among the industry stakeholders. We initially talk about the awareness, which is quite critical. A lot of people are not quite aware of how it actually works, so they find it difficult to actually go into it. Just like you have to be like a risk taker to get into such kind of to invest in that, because you need to invest in the human resources, you need to invest in the technology, and you also need to invest in the process as well, because all of the components goes together. They go together, so you can't just take one and leave the others. Another aspect of it is the client interest. As long as client does not actually show interest in this, we find it difficult to move forward. So that's why legislation is really important. Like when you go for the UK, the reason why they have that kind of standard level of things, it's because most of the time, they normally put things into legislation. They legislate that kind of thing. But for the US aspect of it, it's kind of flexible, because it has actually been moved by, motivated by the professionals, specifically the American Institute of Architects. They actually started championing that, and then followed by the stakeholders from the professionals, then comes down to the move by the government itself. But for the UK, it actually started from it's top-down approach. Actually, it's from the government down to the stakeholders. So these are some of the drivers actually that motivates having that adopted.
Yeah, that's quite clear. Although some people also believe that, a lot of time people try to compare the build sector with other sectors like medicine or engineering. I mean, like automobile. They believe that we don't have to wait for clients to actually demand for BIM before we can integrate it. If it's going to improve our processes as a business or as an industry, perhaps we shouldn't be the one to wait for the client. That's what some people actually believe.
Yeah. I think I believe in that perspective, but the issue is, if you look at it, it needs investment, and it's not every firm that can invest in that kind of because the issue, it's quite real that when you have a small project, you rather use the conventional or a norm way of doing things. When you go into this kind of digital aspect, you are sort of wasting much of resources, because even the procurement method you are adopting cannot even support you to do that. So if you have a small project, you find it difficult actually to do that, because there is no much return on investment in that. In fact, there is no return on investment in that, because when you normally have small projects, it is the big project that actually funds such kind of innovative way of working. Then you can use that to enhance the smaller projects. But in such a way that you have only smaller project, you find it difficult to invest in that. And if you have a bigger project, you need to have a right procurement strategy to actually adopt that, because every professional has its own jurisdiction, because for every BIM based project, you need to have BIM implementation plan. in a situation whereby you have some of the stakeholders are not keen to going along with you, you find it difficult to go with it. I believe you can believe that.
Yes, that's very true. That's very, very accurate. Okay, so based on some of the things you've said, it's obvious that one of the major issues is lack of skilled personnel, and I believe that one of the ways to tackle this is to actually prepare the students right from the higher education institutions. And currently,
Yeah.
even on a global scale, it becomes obvious that there's this gap between, as if most of the students are not well prepared for the industry ahead of them. So, because of this divide between the higher education institutions and the industry, how do you think the institutions and the basic bodies in this sector can contribute to bridging this gap that kind of enables the this sector, especially in Saharan Africa?
That's really interesting, because this is the major concern, because from the early stage of my research, what I realized that most of the companies, they complain about the kind of graduate we produce from our high institutions. So the first thing we need to actually look at is our curriculum. Our curriculum is quite old, and it has not been revised for a quite number of, I think it can be said, maybe decades. So we've been using a very old curriculum, which the world has already gone beyond that. So imagine going into our universities and you see people are drawing paper and pen and things like that, and they even produce some of things that you don't need to actually go to that. CAD has already been amazing tool for the built industry. Not actually built industry. I think it can be something of interest from for other industries. The first thing to be revised is our curriculum, and the second aspect, it's our model of teaching, because we have disjointed teaching strategy, because you have architects being trained independently, you have a structural engineer or civil engineer trained independently, and you have a mechanical, electrical, and other aspect of services actually trained independently. So as long as you train them independently, they have never worked collaboratively, you find it difficult to bring them together within a very shortest period of time. So what is actually needed to be done first is, after revising our curriculum, to have this kind of process embedded, or this kind of modules embedded into our curriculum. We need to bring our professionals or our students together from the university level, from high institutions level. So by what we need to do it by bringing them to have like each component of, maybe you can have like team of engineers, like 2 civil engineers, 2 quantity surveyors, 2 architects, 2 mechanical engineers, 2 electrical engineers, something of that kind. You form a team and you give them a task, give them a project. Firstly, you need to bring them together, give them a brief, and the architect will start his work, because he should always be the first to come in when you talk about the building industry. So when you bring them together at early stage, they know how to work together. This one knows this is the responsibility of this person, and I know this is my responsibility. I don't cross my boundaries, and I know the information received, this is my exclusive information, but I know I need to share it with other stakeholders for us to have an effective way of working and to have a very a good product. So this is the second aspect. So we need to bring our students together while teaching them. Then the last aspect is when posting them for youth service. You might not call it youth service. It could be like internship, the way doctors do. Go to the clinics or go to a hospital and get trained within 1 year. It's called, what's it called? I think it's been called, actually, it has a name for it. Housemanship. So we need to have engineers, architects, and things like it, because some people, when they go for service, they were not quite matured enough to realize that they need to learn more of what they actually went for. But the thing is, when they graduate, they are going for service, they have to be posted exclusively to the field related to their field of studies. Engineers must be posted to engineering-based companies, and then government as a client representative or something like that. And then the architect need to be posted to relevant companies where they're supposed to work, actually. So when you have them in that perspective, they get trained within that 1 year. So you realize that at the end of the day, when somebody is coming out, is coming as ready-made to be employed. And at that moment, when he comes for service, he won't be feeling like he's a worker. He needs to be paid a certain amount of money, but he is coming as a trainee. So he's going to be well-trained in that perspective, and that will be a better way for developing and enhancing our manpower in sub-Saharan Africa and Nigeria in specific.
Yeah, those are very insightful, some good recommendations because, like you mentioned, some of the practices we find in schools these days are not at par with what you meet when you actually come out of school. So they are training people for things that they are not going to use when they come out. So obviously the curriculum you mentioned, and of course the collaborative aspect of the training as well is also very important because BIM and the industry needs to collaborate more than we do at the moment.
Yeah.
So obviously those are very so it's been some great conversation. But before I round up, I'd like to also ask some very random questions before I look at some of the comments I'm seeing here. So I have two random questions for you. The first one I have is what's your favorite travel destination? I believe you traveled around the world because of the research programs.
That's quite amazing. I love traveling around Africa. That's where I haven't explored much because the only country I actually travel outside Nigeria and Africa, it's South Africa. I travel mostly to like Asian country and the Europe, but I have never traveled to outside Nigeria within Africa other than South Africa. I actually went for a conference, so I love traveling to African countries.
Okay, that's good. So the second question I have is what's your favorite pastime? Outside of research, teaching, and the guild sector, what else do you enjoy doing outside of all these activities?
Wow, I love movies actually, but in the cinema. I love watching like 3D movies in the cinema. That's one aspect I really love them.
Okay, that's great to hear. I also like to watch movies from time to time. So it's been a great conversation. At this point, we just look at some of the comments. I think most of the things that we say are comments. So if you also have any questions based on everything we've discussed so far, we've talked about, we've explained what BIM is all about, talked about BIM maturity, talked about some barriers, talked about some drivers, and also the role of the higher education institutions in the African youth sector. So if you have any questions or comments on that, you can also add them to the comment section. So I can see a comment from Adera Abdullah. He said that collaborative working makes easier when it comes to BIM. Yeah, of course, BIM is all about collaboration.
Yeah.
And they also mentioned that high cost of BIM or BIM platforms will major barriers. Some professionals prefer the use of traditional tools than adopting BIM tools. Yeah, so that was one of the major barriers and also
Barriers.
drivers that I was mentioned in the discussion. And then I can see one other one said hands-on training are not widely available to fresh graduates and professionals. It's more theoretical exposure and knowledge. Yeah, I believe also that has to do a lot with what's currently available. So I don't know if you also have this chip into that one.
Yeah, the in-house training. This is one of the issue that it's been in the public discourse, or like in the domain or in the research perspective, because the issue is when you want to get such kind of training, it has to be online, because to have a physical person to train you within Nigeria, it's really difficult because we have quite a few number of people that can actually deal with that aspect. But there are so many numbers of training online. You can get them like in LinkedIn learning. You can get from some of like what we're talking about here. We have a particular company talking about BIM, trying to drive BIM adoption. I think this is one of it, and it's another thing. Another thing is you can decide to join BIM Africa, BIM Africa, which is really interesting because they have such kind of series of talks. I don't know whether it's been stopped or it's been going on so far. Every month they used to have a talk.
Yeah, it's still ongoing. Actually, it's every month.
It's ongoing. So, but that kind of it's not quite much of training, but it's sort of awareness and trying to put you through the basics. But I think if you can still liaise with the BIM BIM Africa officials to get some of the trainings. And I think you can also see some online trainings that are really gonna help you, though it might not be as physical as you ever think of, because when you attend class face to face is going to be more interesting, and you put on much of your energy in it. But if it's going to be online, you find it difficult to actually sometimes to have even time for it. I think it's a very amazing thing, but seriously, it's really difficult to get somebody to train you within in-house training within Nigeria. I don't know whether
Yeah,
you know somebody that actually can put somebody through in that perspective.
yeah, when it comes to talking about hands-on training, personally I do training myself. I also have a company that does some local training, but just like you said, a lot of times the training that you find locally in Nigeria are tailored more towards the technology aspects of BIM and less on the processes and the people, the management aspects of BIM, which I believe is something that still has to do with the personnel that I have on ground. Because a lot of times, the truth is that a lot of times professionals in Nigeria or people that are really skilled in these jobs, they are not really they are not inspired to come back to Nigeria to practice. A lot of them, it's not like you. It's quite amazing that at least after doing your PhD, you are currently in Nigeria. But most of your colleagues, I'm sure you know that most of them, after doing their studies, they would rather work in the US
Sure,
or the
sure,
UK.
yeah.
So because of that, the ones that you have on ground might not be so well acquainted with the processes. So a lot of time when you talk about BIM, you find people that focus just on the tools, which is of course is a step in the right direction. But of course, so when it comes to hands-on training, there are, even within BIM Africa too, we have some partner organizations too that offer several kind of training. Even Blaze, my company Blaze too, we do training. We even have an online platform for that. And just like you mentioned, to LinkedIn Learning too, you can get a whole lot of tailored training on all those platforms as well.
Yeah,
So
that's really amazing. I think it's a good thing if you can liaise with Blaze. It can guide you to where to get some particular trainings that you are quite interested in. But one issue that we have in here, if you want to train somebody, will you train him with based on the UK pattern, or you're going to train him based on the US pattern, or you're going to train him based on Singapore, or based on Australia,
yeah,
or any? But with the issue, we don't have we did not contextualize our built industry in that perspective.
yes,
So
that's very true.
you then, if you're gonna go for that, then you have to, all those trainers, they normally take one of this. So you hardly get that one for Nigeria.
Yes, because we've not really created our own standards and protocols and all that, which is still a gap currently in the industry. Okay, so Jamila Fani said that one of the issues of the barriers is high cost of acquiring the tools. What can we do to bridge this? Okay, I will ship in my own, then you can also ship in yours. So to me, I think the issue of the high cost of acquiring the tools, first of all, is that the people that are creating the tools, their economy is much more buoyant than ours. So even when they feel like they've subsidized these tools, let's, for example, you want to acquire Autodesk AC collection, which is a collection of about 25 software. Currently, the Naira equivalent is about 1.1 million, which to them in the dollar equivalent, they feel like is actually a subsidized price for 25 different software. But an average firm in Nigeria, we see that as a very exorbitant amount. So
Price.
that's also a reflection that we don't create our own tools. That's one. If we create our own tools, perhaps it will be more affordable. And then secondly, also is the fact that even within the profession, a lot of times we don't even charge a professional fee. You see, when you're bidding for projects, you see companies that are kind of going behind each other to bid at a much more lower price. So if you don't even charge the professional fee, it will be almost impossible for you to recoup the amount, or it
Yeah,
will be possible for you to
exactly.
impossible amount to you to recoup the amount you spent acquiring legitimate software. And most of these companies, like you mentioned, a lot of them use crack software. So because they don't even spend enough money on software, hardware, IT infrastructure, they don't put all those things into consideration when they're bidding for projects. Because if you spend money, millions of naira acquiring software, you spend millions of naira acquiring hardware, and then you now need to put in place
And
frequent
you need to
and
train your staff.
exactly. You need to train your staff. You have constant power, constant internet, and all those things. When you're bidding for projects, you put all these things into your overhead costs, and then when you bill the clients, you actually bill a more professional fee. But because people don't do all these things, you kind of bid for projects, and at the end of the day, end up using. So all these things are some of the barriers as well. But of course, you can also add to that.
Yeah, that's really nice. But the thing is, for the training aspect, I think it's quite a bit cheaper because there's this kind of tools they've been made for educational purpose, which are quite limited to some aspect of their usage. So for educational institution, I think that's not quite a bad effort. You can start that as an educational institution, and you can have the educational version. But the educational version cannot do everything. It has limitations, and everything you do, it will be showing educational version. So for the training, it won't be much of an issue, but for you to use that one, the authentic one, is going to be a huge cost of investment. That's why most of the companies that are adopting that, they have to spread that cost over maybe a particular some projects to augment the cost of the investment.
Yeah, that's true. So, of course, perhaps for the students that are still in school, for the training for the students, of course, Autodesk and some of these companies, they have educational license that can be used for training purposes. So, of course, that's like a long-term strategy to prepare the students ahead of time. But for the firms that are doing commercial projects, they still need to go for the standard license version of these tools. And then someone is after Peter said, any thoughts on BIM and artisans? Okay, I guess I understand why you're driving at, because a lot of times you see that it's just the professionals that a lot of time we talk about being focused more on professionals, but even when it comes to the delivery of these projects, you see that the artisans have a huge role to play as well. And these people, they are not even slightly aware of technology or the collaborative aspects. For example, let's say you want to talk about implementing BIM on the field, and you want to bring, or discussing with someone that they're talking about bringing tools like Autodesk Build, for example, that allows communication between people in the company and people on the field. And then you expect people on the field to have mobile devices, and you can raise issues on site and send those issues to people on the office. And so that kind of communication between artisans that are on site, or at least the workers on site and the people. So I think that even on a global scale, it's still a major challenge. But when it comes to Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, it's even worse. So it has a lot to do with training and even the way we deliver projects. Even, I mean, the kind of contracts we go into when it comes to projects, who is responsible for, who actually employs these people, and who is responsible for paying them, and what kind of contract delivery that actually goes on that. But perhaps you can also have one or two things to add to it.
Yeah. I think it's something of concern because some of the artisans will be feeling that they will be sent out of market because with this evolution of innovation in the fourth industrial revolution, we have automation coming on, we have 3D printing, and these kind of things. They feel like, oh, this is a threat to us. Anyway, it's a threat in one way, but it's an opportunity for in another way because you actually get enhanced. Like your training you'll be enhanced on how to use some of these items, because some of these items you shouldn't be thinking that, okay, because I'm now using a knife and a plaster and how to do plaster with my hands and things like that. You need to start thinking, okay, what's the next level of how to plaster? There should be equipment that you use to do plastering. There's equipment used to do painting, maybe in an automated way. So you need to enhance yourself in that perspective also. So you shouldn't be thinking that you're going to be phased out of the market because you only know how to do the manual thing. But you need to also look into the aspect of your work and see how you can enhance that. What is the technology in that perspective? That's my take in that direction.
Yeah, so basically they need to upskill themselves if you want to be relevant in the industry 4.0
revolution.
Okay, yeah, that's very insightful as well. And then someone here, Abiodun Kulawole, said, I guess the problem of BIM in Nigeria is that there's no wide awareness and understanding of the concept, especially among the professionals. Yeah, so like you mentioned, currently in Nigeria, there's a relatively higher level of awareness compared to some other sub-Saharan African countries. But a lot of times you see that the awareness is not necessarily translating to adoption. People are increasingly aware, at least even if on a theoretical level, they are aware of what BIM is and what they might need to do to implement BIM. But when it comes out to the adoption of it, you still see most of those barriers playing out. Some of them find it expensive to acquire software. Some of them don't have the trained personnel to do these things. So I think awareness is not beyond awareness. We should also be looking at adoption as well. But of course, also want to have one or two things chip in as well?
Yeah, that's it. I think you have said it all.
Okay, all right. So, after Peter also say, when thinking of localizing BIM so that it can work on a typical state in Nigeria, do you think artisans have any place in BIM? Okay, still talking about artisans. So, talking about localizing BIM and the role of artisans, what role do you think artisans have to play when talking about localizing BIM in Nigerian build sector?
Yeah, just as we just talked about, they have to upskill themselves. But the thing is, who's gonna upskill them? For them, because you hardly see like government focusing on them in that perspective. So even at engineering or architecture or quantity surveying level, if you look at our organizations or our regulatory bodies, they don't even pay much attention into that. You don't even talk about even the artisan themselves. But for the artisan, I think the best way is for you to upskill yourself, because when you a simple Google search, you can know the kind of a kind of innovation coming up in an artisanship responsibilities. So you cannot just be phased out completely, because you will be the person on ground to do. The engineer or the architect or the builder or the kiosk cannot just be on site to do the work with his hands. You understand? You're still going to be the one, like maybe controlling the equipment or the plants or anything that's going to do the work. It's going to be your responsibility, not actually the drivers, but you're going to be like what's it called? There's a word they use it for people that actually control all this robotics. So you're going to be such kind of people. So these are your future at the moment. So you need to explore that as well.
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, one of the major questions is who is going to train them. I think that's where another question comes in, because I think currently
Yeah.
there's that gap at the moment, because a lot of the training that you see is either tailored towards students or towards professionals. So nobody's actually talking about artisans, and so to actually give them a structural training is something that even on a global scale, I think there's hardly not much training that is tailored towards artisans, and they actually
But I
make
think
up
it's, I think
majority
it's
of the
going to
workforce.
diffuse over time. It's going to diffuse over time, because once it gets to our level, maybe the professionals, it's going to sink down to the artisans as well.
Yeah, okay. That's another one. Okay, so I have another question here, which is actually tailored directly at you. It's actually asking you, say, good evening, sir. You mentioned that Nigeria do not have an existing BIM standard. How do we create one? So how do we create our own BIM standard? Even if maybe Africa as a whole, how do we create our own localized BIM standard?
Yeah, we have effort being put by BIM Africa, but I don't know we have like kind of committees, or actually people actually handle different aspects of this thing for BIM Africa. But it's a bit slow, because there is no much sponsors of that. Assuming now this BIM Africa has been taken very seriously by maybe some sponsors, money is being paid, people are being paid to do the work, I think that would have gone much, much faster. But at the moment, I know the only place such kind of thing that is evolving is BIM Africa, none other than that. But unless if legislation can be pushed to the National Assembly, and if that can go through, then we can have such of a thing happening at government level.
Yeah, that's true. Because I'm also part of BIM Africa, I know that it's kind of challenging when if it's in some advanced countries, things like that, you have a level of sponsorship. But when you as a professional, you also have your own things to do. And BIM Africa, of course, is a volunteer organization, it's a not-for-profit organization. So because there is no financial backup to some of those activities, it tends to be slower than compared to other parts of the world. So of course, the possibility is there, but like you mentioned, it will still require some level of sponsorship or some government intervention to accelerate the efforts. And then I think we'll have one last question here. Still have a few minutes to go. So this is also from Jamila Fan. He said that as a contractor, we own and have trained the AC software and have been waiting for the opportunity to fully use it across the project team, internally and externally. We're yet to have that opportunity, even among consultants. There's still work to be done. The conversation cannot stop. Okay, so basically, yeah, looking at it, okay, I guess you are a contracting firm And from what you're saying, the consultants are not really up to speed when it comes to BIM adoption. Yeah, of course, generally in Nigeria, there's been that, in terms of BIM implementation, there's still a whole lot of work to be done, which obviously is what informs all these kind of discussions, which also, like you mentioned, BIM Africa before the COVID-19 came up, we also used to organize physical events where we invite people to discuss around all these topics. So obviously, it's something the conversation needs to continue, and we need to also go beyond just discussion to actually implementing these projects. So
I think let me also add to what she talked about. She's been trained as a contractor. The issue we have here is we have major. We normally operate major to what's it called, procurement strategies. We normally operate with a traditional method where you have consultants, we have a client, and we also have a contractor. So the project starts from the consultant, initiated by actually the client, then coming into the consultant, and then the contractor will be appointed. So everything's been transmitted from the consultant into the contractor. So contractor has any option of taking something outside what's been produced by the consultant. So the contractor is actually, his hands are quite tight. So he mostly adopt what's actually coming from the consultant. So this is one aspect of it. And the other procurement route, we use a turnkey project, or we call it design and build. In this perspective, that kind of procurement strategy is encouraging a collaborative way of working, because all the engineers, the designers, and the constructors are the same, like from the same company. So it is within your domain. You can do whatever you want. So if you have such kind of procurement strategy, it's easy to build on or to work with what you have on the ground. You can decide to deploy all these kind of strategies. But if you are working with a consultant, sure, your hands will be tight to have that happen. And that's why sometimes they say, okay, the procurement strategy that actually influences, or that actually motivates the deployment of BIM is the design and build, because you will be the one and you can decide what to use actually.
Yeah, that's true. And perhaps you can also shed more light on the contract method you use mostly on projects. But I believe that in Nigeria, most of the contract methods are mostly the design, build, the traditional contract method. And that kind of limits what the contractor can actually do beyond the consultant's submissions.
I think we have these management contracting, and there is innovation contract. But the innovation contract is still going to be the consultant first, but the design aspect will be transferred to the contractor, and then will lay off the consultant. And now the contractor will take the responsibility of everything, even the assurance of quality and everything of the design made by the consultant. So in that perspective, unless if you're going to start the design from the scratch for you to embed BIM, but you can't just take it from that point where they stopped and then you build up with BIM. It's really difficult. But for the management aspect, it's normally the client that motivates, that actually determines who becomes the contractor. So in this perspective, regardless of whoever one, it's going to be management. So it's management that will look at their understanding with some of their contractors that have been working overtime. It's based on arrangement normally. So that one you see is still going to be a bit tight for the contractor to build on that. So I think the most important aspect of it is, if you're going to take the procurement route that's going to motivate you to do that, I think you take the design and build.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot for the insights as well. So, okay, before we actually round up, we've been talking around the role that professionals also have to play. So what advice can you give, an average professional that is trying to implement BIM, he knows that BIM is important, he can see that it's the future, but he's kind of confused on how to actually implement BIM, perhaps even if on a micro level. So what advice will you give to maybe a professional or a small firm, which you find mostly in Nigeria? What advice will you give to such a person?
That's quite difficult at the moment, at the stage we are. But all I can say is just put on your feet and cover the ground. What does not move does not make progress. So you have to make a step further. The first step you make is to start small. Don't take big. When you start big, you are prone to crashing. So take a step-by-step process. Maybe you just take, okay, my thing is I want to start implementing at modeling stage. Whatever comes to you, pass by your site, model it, do an intelligent model. Whoever is going to get your drawings and going to get your model is going to be intelligent one. No matter what they say about you, okay, convert it to PDF or also whatever, just make it intelligent model. When you start that, people will start patronizing your work. And before you know it, you can start saying, okay, if they have their own personal consultants, maybe structural engineer or quantity surveyor, try to be communicating with them, try to put in, because what I realized that the best way to pass this information faster is through professional contact by professionals. So if you'll be having much contact with this kind of professionals, you easily influence their decision in the kind of tools they're going to use in their subsequent project. So for them seeing you, okay, this is the kind of tool you're going to use, you can advise them, okay, when you use this is the advantage of doing this, this is the advantage of using this. So with that, you start collab.
Okay, it appears we lost you, but of course we've already gone through all the comments and questions. Jamila Fani said, thank you, we have been proactive and ready to deploy, but thanks all the same. So yeah, you're welcome. We hope that in the very near future we'll see a lot more BIM implementation across the whole youth sector in Africa and in Nigeria and beyond Sub-Saharan Africa generally. So thanks a lot, everyone that's been here. I don't know if Mansur is back.
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, we lost it the other time. So thank you very much for your time, for making our time to share your knowledge with us today. It's been a great insight. It's been a great time communicating with you and discussing with you on the issue of BIM adoption in Sub-Saharan Africa. So to every other person attending the event, it's also great to have you to the event. This is what we do every 2 weeks.
It's my great pleasure.
Yeah,
it's my pleasure being with you this evening.
Yeah, thank you very much. Every 2 weeks, we invite someone new to share an idea on something related to digital transformation of the youth sector with emphasis in Africa. So in the coming week, we also communicate on the next edition of the Connected Construction Series. So thank you all for being with us.
It's my pleasure as well.